We've seen a defense over the last 2 weeks that has been run through, cut through like a hot knife through butter. They have been dominated on just about every aspect. Tua looked like a god against the Chicago Bears last week. When you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, right, you also have to talk about the two major pieces of your defense, your two leaders of your defense being taken away right before the last two games, right? Major changes coming right before your last two games. And so here's my question to you. When you see how this defense has been playing, when you see how subpar they've been, who are you most looking at as the issue in that situation? Are you looking at Fuls? Are you looking at Allen Williams? Are you looking at just a lack of talent? What are you looking at most when it comes to the Chicago Bears defense? Because I think here's the thing that I'm really focusing in on. With this Bears defense, they've gone through a couple of major pieces being shipped off in the last couple weeks. They've gone through a couple of major pieces being traded away in the last couple of weeks. And that's hard to bounce back from. And they haven't looked prepared over the last couple of weeks. But I'm seeing a lot of people look at Fuls and say, this is your expertise. This is what you do. You should be able to figure out how to get this defense. And here's the thing. I'm not saying to look good, but to look competent. The defense the last couple of weeks hasn't looked competent. They've given up, 49 and 35? How much 49 and 35 over the last 2 weeks. It's not a competent defense. Now, I guess you could say it's getting better. And technically, the defense only gave up 28 in that second week. But when I look at this defense, I'm trying to figure out more so where the improvement can come most. Where do we think is it the coaching? Is it Fuls? Or is it just the talent? Because to me, I'm looking at a defensive unit right now that at the end of the day, I see them being in position to make a play, and they're not making plays. I see them being in position to make a tackle, and they're missing the tackle. I see them being in position to bring somebody down who's running the football and maybe not allowing them to get an extra 5 yards, and they're allowing them to get that extra 5 yards, right? And that's the thing that is concerning to me. Because while there is a lack of talent, 100%, you can't say that the Bears aren't lacking talent on that side of the football. There's a lot of young talent on that side of the football. You basically have guys, you know what I mean, at your linebacker position. I think on the defensive line, right, you've got Dominique Robinson, young talent. Outside of that, right, there's just not a lot of guys that are creating pressure on the football. But at the end of the day, there's two things that I'm really looking at, and it's both of the coaches. Because when you lost Roquan, when you lost Quinn, it went from being, right, like when we talk about the offensive side of the football, the offensive side of the football looks so disciplined. It looks so, like you're not seeing a lot of offensive penalties. You're not seeing a lot of false starts. You're not seeing a lot of guys moving. You're seeing guys understand where they're supposed to be on the field. You're seeing, right, like you're seeing discipline on the offensive side of the ball. When you get to the defensive side of the ball, not to say that they're not disciplined, but it's like they're not playing in the right spots. They're not getting to their spots quick enough. They're not hustling to their spots, which is a big part of that hits principle, right? Quick enough. And that's the part where I'm looking at this Bears team and I'm saying, okay, yes, I understand Roquan Smith isn't there. I understand Robert Quinn isn't there. I understand you got rid of Khalil Mack. You got rid of Akeem Hicks, right? I get all of that. I'm fine with that. But there's also times where you're not making the play that's there to be made. And even Coach Fuls talked about it in his press conference yesterday, right? He talked about execution. He talked about how the defense just isn't executed. They're there, but you have to execute that play. You have to be able to bring that guy down. You have to be able to, right? Like, so to me, right, that's the part where I'm looking at and I'm like, okay, yeah, there's a part that's definitely on the players. For sure. They're the ones out there making the plays. But why aren't they executing at a rate like we saw, right? Like it can't just be, oh, they don't have enough talent to do that. We're seeing guys just not break to the ball hard enough. We're seeing guys, and maybe it's just youth. Maybe it's just that they haven't been in these situations a ton before, right? Like Jalen Johnson, Eddie Jackson, those guys, right? I look at a little bit different. But there's a mindset there that we're not seeing on the defensive side that I think we were seeing early on in the year, right? And remember, before we got to, who was it? Before we got to Detroit, right? We had only allowed 1 second half touchdown. Before we got to Detroit, we'd only allowed 1 second half touchdown. Not Detroit, Dallas. We'd only allowed 1 second half touchdown. Maybe two. And so that's the part where I'm looking at and I'm like, okay, like what happened to that? Roquan Smith doesn't just change 1 second. He helps. But that means there was a collection. That means that there was a mindset. That means that there was an understanding of, hey, I need to be in this spot. I need to make this play. And I'm not saying, right, there is a human element to this too. You saw two of your brothers get shipped off. You saw two of your brothers get traded away. That plays into it. And I can't kill Kyler Gordon. I can't kill Jaquan Brisker, Jalen Johnson, all those guys, right? Because it starts up front. So I'm sitting here watching a game where there's 5-6 seconds going off of the clock and the quarterback still has no pressure. I'm looking at the dogs up front. I'm looking at the guys up front. I think that plays a big part into it as well. But even right, like there were plays to be made on Sunday defensively that weren't made. And I think that's the part where I have a little bit of concern. And I understand, right, at the end of the day, this is a trial year. This is not it's all figured out year. I understand that. But you still want to see your team have those guys perform. You still want to see your team be able to slow guys down, right? And if you're not bringing that pressure, that means that you're understanding, okay, when I'm dropping back, guess what? I have to be able to play the middle of the field. I have to be able to slow these guys down. I've got to. It's going to be more time. It's on me. And there's no DB in the world, I mean, outside of maybe Prime, that's going to be out there for 5-6 seconds doing a great job on the guy he's covering. You got to get that pressure. But the one thing that I will say, right, and I think here's the part that I look at the most when I'm looking at who do we put the blame on, whatever it is. I like how Fuls has handled it. I like the understanding of the system of power that is in place. Fuls isn't, oh, the defense is struggling, let me get my hands on that. Right? Like, remember Matt Nagy when the offense was struggling? Oh, I'll fix it. Don't worry about it. I'll fix it. I'll do it. Fuls is out here. He's playing like a general, delegating to everybody else. Hey, listen, you got the offense. Getsy, that's on you. Let's figure it out. I'll work with you on that. We'll talk about some stuff together, but it's your offense. Run it. Hey, Williams, you got the defense. Hey, listen, we're going to have conversations. You know I'm going to be in the defensive meeting rooms. I'm going to be talking with the guys. We're going to set a standard here. But he's not taking it away. And again, I talked about this yesterday, right? The things that excite me with this Chicago Bears team. That's something that excites me with the Chicago Bears team. It's a leadership mentality. There's a leader in the room. And yeah, there's some blame that's going to go on him. I'm not going to lie. I think a little bit of the players hustle, right? Like, not to say the players don't have to do it, but I feel like there could be a little bit more hustle from the team as a whole on the defensive side of the football. I think everybody would agree with that. But the bottom line is that Alan Williams is trying to figure that out. Alan Williams is trying to implement that. Alan Williams is calling these plays. He's the one putting them in a position. And I think for the most part, right, the Bears are in a position. You just got to make the play. And maybe that's where the lack of talent part does come in. But I'm looking at how Fuls is working with the talent that he has. And I'm not talking about the players. I'm talking about the coaches. I'm looking at how Fuls is working with the coaching staff that he has, and he's not saying, hey, let me get that up off of you, my boy. He's not saying, hey, you're not calling that good enough. I need to take that back because I know how to call this defense. Because at the end of the day, right, it is what it is. Either you picked the right guy or you didn't. And if you don't believe that you picked the right guy, that's on you. So now I'm looking at the situation where Fuls clearly feels like he picked the right guy and he can actually be the head coach. He's not sitting there when it's 3rd and 7 and you're trying to figure out a defensive play to stop the ball and there's a play on the field and it's like, hey, coach, you want to challenge that? And he's like, what are you talking about? He doesn't know what the play is right now, right? Like Fuls is understanding that, hey, I need to know what's going on the field so that I can properly assess what's happening on the field and understand and relay this message to my coaching staff and say what I'm seeing and what I'm thinking and be able to make these coaching decisions. Am I taking this penalty? Am I not taking this penalty? What's the situation with the clock? I love that we have a CEO in place. So when I'm looking at, okay, the defense is struggling, is it talent, is it coaching, is it blame? I'm putting, like, of course, it all falls on Fuls at the end of the day. But I'm looking at Fuls as, hey, you're understanding that you have a bigger job than just trying to be a really good defensive coordinator. You have a bigger job that includes the entire Chicago Bears team. And that's one thing that I think the Bears really just haven't had. That's the one part that gets me a little bit excited about where this coaching staff is, because that's the one thing the Bears haven't had. We haven't had just a leader of men. We've had coordinators. Lovie Smith called his defense. John Fox, maybe John Fox a little more leadery, but didn't have much of a team. Matt Nagy called his offense. Trestman called his offense. Right? Like when you have that leader, when you have that, that's the part where I'm like, we talked about this week, right? Are the Bears set up for the future? Yes. Because you've got a guy that, here's the thing, Alan Williams does a great job. If he does, somebody's going to offer him a head coaching job. That's inevitable. Luke Getsy does a great job. Somebody's going to offer him a head coaching job. That's inevitable. So what do you need that's going to be stable? What do you need that's going to be in the right position? You have to have that leader of men. And I think you finally have that. And so when I'm looking at the defensive struggles, right? Yeah, I want Fuls to give his input. Yeah, I want Fuls to be over there like, hey, maybe these are some tweaks we can make. And I think Alan Williams has talked about that they have done that. He understands where the issues are coming in, right? You heard Fuls talking about 3rd down execution. We get these guys in the 3rd and longs and we can't get a stop. At the end of the day, 3rd down execution is poor right now. We've got to figure that out. We've got to understand that as a collective. But Alan's going to work with the team on that. He's going to figure that out. Because my job is bigger than just the Chicago Bears defense. My job is bigger than just the Chicago Bears being able to stop the run on 3rd down. My job is, okay, now that we stop the run on 3rd down, what's the decision we need to make coming off into the kickoff? What's the decision we need to make if we get a turnover here? What's the decision we need to make if we're that's what I want to see my head coach do. And I'm glad that we finally have a guy that seems like he's going to be able to do that. The whole coordinator thing, right? Like that I get it. That's the modern NFL and it works. I'm not saying it doesn't. But the big picture at the end of the day is, can you lead these men? Not can you lead this offense? Not can you lead this defense? Because you need both sides of the ball. You need both sides of the ball to win football games. And I'm not gonna lie, bro, when Fuls came in, he said, hey, no, I'm gonna be focused on figuring out how I'm going to be focused on the head coaching position. I'm going to have coordinators in there. They're going to do their job. That got me the most excited out of anything because, right, like you have a coach that's focused on what's happening on the field. That's the most important thing. How many times in previous regimes have we seen coaches that just, they're so focused on one side of the field? Heck, as much as I like Lovie Smith, he took us to the only Super Bowl I've ever seen in Chicago. We didn't win it, but he took us there. And that defense takes you there. That defense carries you there. Lovie Smith didn't give a hoot about the offensive side of the football. Lovie Smith could have cared less about the offensive side of the football. Even Olin Kreutz would talk about, right? Like he talked about, he said Lovie used to be like, oh, well, you know, when what he say Lovie used to say, he said, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing and eventually it's going to work. And Olin would be like, bro, this ain't working. He didn't care about the offensive side of the ball. He cared about takeaways, cared about the defense putting you in a position to have easy scores. That's all he was worried about. Matt Nagy was only worried about throwing the football down the field. I don't know what Mark Trestman was worried about. He was worried about his action figures in the back of the room. He was worried about that Star Wars museum popping up in the back of the room. I think that's all Mark Trestman was worried about. I don't really know if he was worried about anything football wise. But that's what I'm looking at from my head coach. That's the part that I'm looking at. Like the video, if you agree, that when you have a head coach that's being a head coach, that's leading, that, yeah, I like that he has some understanding of both sides of the football, but I don't care. Can you get 53 men excited to play football on Sunday? Seems like he can. Can you get these coaches prepared to go out there and put a good game plan together? It seems like he can. That's what I care about. That's what I think is going to be key to the Chicago Bears' future at the end of the day. And that's what I'm most focused on, man, honestly. Honestly, that's the part, right? Even going into this game versus the Lions, right? Again, how prepared is this Bears team going to be? Can we really say that there's a week this season, maybe early on, but for the most part, I think this season, the Chicago Bears have been pretty prepared to go out and play football. For the most part this season, the Chicago Bears have been they've understood who they're playing against. They've understood how they need to play something defensively, offensively, different situations like that, right? They've kind of figured that out. So for me, right, that's the part that I'm looking at, and I'm like, okay, yeah, like I love that. We come out of a mini bye. Not only do we win the game, but we kick the crap out of them. You went through a tough part of your schedule right here, and you've lost what? Well, what have we lost? 4 or 5 or something like that? You lost to the Commanders. You beat the Patriots. You lose to you lose to Dallas. You've lost 3 or 4. You lose to Dallas. You lost to Miami. And yet I still look at this team like, hey, they look prepared. They look like they're ready for this moment. They look like, now on the defensive end, I could see a little bit more. On the defensive end, I think that they've looked a little unprepared in the first quarter. They've come out in these first halves a little flat. But the team as a whole seems like, okay, I understand what I need to do. This is what we want to do offensively. This is the game plan that we have. This is how, okay, now we need to adjust this. And on top of that, right, going into the half and coming out of the other side of the half, shout out to them. They've been prepared. So I love that we have this leader of men in place for once. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing for the Chicago Bears moving forward, man, that it's not just a coach or a coordinator or somebody that's out there trying to call the best defense or somebody that's out there trying to call the best offense. It's a guy that looks at the guys on the field and says, hey, I understand what you're going through. I understand what you're trying to accomplish here. Let's accomplish this together. I'm going to be the fixed point at the front. That's what you want to see in a head coach.